It has not been a good week for public schools in the Denver metro area. Teachers accused of wrongdoing, schools trying to explain what looks an awful lot like cover-ups. First to Denver and the video that our 9 Wants to Know team first showed you last night that's now national news. Principal of the city's premier high school is on leave, along with the athletic director, cheerleading coach, assistant coach, and a lawyer for the district. The coach at the center of the videotape is Ozell Williams, the one forcing screaming girls into forced splits. Tonight we have learned that Williams was let go as a consultant with the Boulder High cheerleaders last year because another coach saw him using the same technique. In between Boulder High and East High, he worked very briefly at a gym in Brighton. Our Marshall Zellinger has been out doing the due diligence that it's not clear that DPS ever bothered to do.
It's his last job before he went to East High.
You know that?
I know that, yeah.
Did East High School or anybody from Denver Public Schools call for a reference?
No one ever called me for a reference on him. Nobody.
What would your reference have been?
My reference would have been to not allow him around your athletes. That he is aggressive and that, yes, he has skills and yes, he is a good coach for some, but for the majority of athletes, he will deteriorate them.
We are continuing to request an opportunity to speak with Denver Public Schools Superintendent Tom Boasberg, who put out a written statement saying that the videos were distressing and contrary to DPS's values, but he has been unwilling to take our questions. One medical professional is defending what you see in that cheerleading video. A senior instructor at the University of Colorado Medical School mocked the girls who were screaming in pain. Dr. James Mosier wrote on Twitter, "Every athlete goes through some difficult pain. If you cannot deal with it, mommy is always at home." The University of Colorado said Dr. Mosier wasn't speaking for the university or the med school on his personal Twitter account when he mocked those cheerleaders. The doctor deleted his account and declined comment. The person who broke this national story was working on a slew of stories for Next while this one was in process. Marshall Zellinger's along now. So let's talk about the anatomy of these stories. Take people behind the scenes, how it goes from a news tip that comes into our newsroom to now a national scandal.
We get a news tip, we try to find contact information, reach out to the families involved, had to have a meeting to kind of ease their minds about why we were reaching out to them, why it would be okay for them to talk to us. Then we have to vet those concerns, which took us to the point of an open records request with Denver Public Schools, and suddenly the next day, yesterday, Denver police started investigating it. But they didn't investigate it when the parents had first contacted the school 2 months ago. Curious.
As is often the case now, the reaction of the players in the story becomes the story itself, because now it's who knew at East and all these folks up the food chain that are in trouble. It indicates that they weren't talking to the higher ups of the district.
And when you see that the school district's deputy counsel is one of those on leave, it's like, who knew what and why that person is on leave?
How do these stories change when they go from a local story to a national story?
Well, we get phone calls and emails and Facebook posts and all the social media left and right, and then that becomes more difficult vetting those, which is how we got to that coach that you just saw earlier, the last employer of him. She calls in, tells us a story. We have to vet it. Hey, do you have photos of him working at the gym? What can you tell us about the time together that we can prove that he was there? And it takes that due diligence of, hey, we need more than just your story to know that it's true.
When these stories go viral, you get good tips and you get really bad ones too, and maybe deceptive ones. All right, Marshall Zellinger, thank you for your work on this. Now to Cherry Creek School District, where they're struggling to provide a coherent explanation as to why sexual assault charges against an employee, who's the son of a longtime district administrator, was kept quiet, while sexual assault charges against a little-known middle school teacher were broadcast far and wide. Our 9 Wants to Know team is still asking questions about the case of Grandview High School security guard Broderick Lundy. The district says that Lundy's father's powerful position with the district is not why his alleged crimes were kept secret. The district says it was because there was only one victim, no reason to look for others. Yet court documents we've seen indicate that Lundy was exchanging messages with several students, and at least one other student may have received messages about sex, and those messages were deleted when detectives went to look. Parents will argue they have a right to know if a teacher or school employee is arrested on child sexual assault charges. They don't have such a right. Our Steve Steger explains the failed effort to give Colorado's parents the right to know.
There is no statewide rule that requires districts to report teacher or staff arrests to parents. It's up to the individual districts. But there used to be.
So I introduced a rule under the State Board of Education, which is in the purview of the State Board.
That's Bob Schaefer, a Northern Colorado charter school principal who was once chair of the State Board of Education after serving as a Republican in Congress. He created a rule in 2011 that required all districts to notify parents of a staff member or former staff member's arrest if it met a certain criteria, most specifically, if the arrest involved felony charges or any crime involving a child. The state's largest teachers union sued, claiming the requirement put teachers on trial in the court of public opinion before a real court.
You're right. This person has not been prosecuted and found guilty yet. But look, all arrests are public record.
The court never ruled on that case because the state legislature threw out the rule later that year. Schaefer says he thinks about it every time he reads a story involving a teacher arrest, and he wonders whether districts have too much skin in the game to make a call like this.
When it happens, it catches everybody by surprise. I mean, these are for a principal, this would be an employee that you hired and that you endorsed and that you put in a classroom with somebody else's children. These are not bad people who are trying to cover things up. It's just their motivations are very different, and they look at situations in a way that is not the same as a parent would.
For Next, I'm Steve Stager.
Most large school districts in the metro area told us today that they do not have a written policy. They'll decide whether to notify parents of employee arrests on a case-by-case basis. Here are my thoughts on that. If school districts are going to be given the discretion to withhold employee arrests and wrongdoing, they need to use that discretion to protect something other than their own backsides. East High School in Denver and Grandview and Cherry Creek don't give us a whole lot of confidence. Now, it is unfair to expect every school employee everywhere to be perfect all the time, but it is fair to expect school leaders to tell police about suspected wrongdoing and to tell parents when police determine that there's probable cause that something terrible happened. Who was being protected when East High School was silent? Who was being protected when Grandview High School was silent? It wasn't the kids, that's for sure. Opioid drug overdoses killed more people in Colorado than car crashes in 2014, and it was right around that time that the state passed a new law meant to crack down on the abuse of prescription painkillers, which was behind the majority of those overdoses. So, a few years on now, is Colorado's crackdown on opioids working? Brandon Ritteman and our Verify team take a look.
We'd always like to give you a clean-cut yes or no when we verify things, but it turns out opioids are a tricky problem. This is going to sound like a paradox, but two things are true. We verified that the new state law is helping, but we also verified opioid overdose deaths continue to break records in Colorado. How can those both be true? Well, the new state law took on a big problem, doctor shopping, which simply means going to a bunch of different doctors trying to score painkillers. Used to be, if you asked the doctors about this,
they think, well, my patients aren't the doctor shoppers. I would know who would be a doctor shopper, and they have learned over the years that you really can't tell.
Dr. Robert Valek is a professor of pharmacy at CU and president of the State Prescription Drug Abuse Task Force, where he's been a member for 19 years.
There is no profile of a person who might be a doctor shopper. It could be anyone, young or old, male or female, any race, any gender.
The state tried tracking this problem with a computer system, the Prescription Drug Monitoring Program. It was voluntary. Only 30% of doctors used it. So the state changed the law in 2013. They required pharmacies to use the system. They didn't make doctors use it, but they did make the doctors at least sign up for an account if they prescribed controlled substances. Some doctors complained that the system took up too much of their time, so the new law also allowed doctors' office workers to log on. That 30% shot up to 91% in 2015 as a result. And the data shows doctors actually started using it. At first, they flagged a bunch of potential doctor shoppers, and then a lot fewer as people realized it was hard to get away with anymore. And you can see the effect it's had on this chart of prescription opioid deaths. The number of deaths went down 2 years in a row. That's never happened before in the last 17 years. So it's working. Case closed, right? Not exactly. Users are finding another place to get the same fix. heroin dealers. We've shown you the footage of people selling and using on the Cherry Creek bike path. Denver's district attorney says she sees more people dealing heroin because addicts still want opioids, legal or not.
If they can't get that prescription, if they're still really addicted, then they switch to heroin. And heroin is cheaper. It's available on the street.
That's extra frustrating for DA Beth McCann because she sponsored the bill to crack down on doctor shopping back when she was in the state legislature. She's proud to see these numbers go down, but it's hard to celebrate that when heroin deaths are way up all of a sudden. In the past year, prescription opioid deaths went down 9%, but heroin deaths are up 43% in Colorado, undoing the progress made on this disease.
That's been a unintended consequence, if you will, of the reduction in opioids prescriptions.
So we verified what's happening. Yes, the state law is working on one battle, but we're still losing the war against the opioid epidemic. They fixed an easier problem. Pharmacies are going to obey the law. Heroin dealers, not so much. Still, there are some things to try next. Doctors are starting to prescribe fewer pills for things like minor surgery because those leftover pills are how a lot of addicts get started. And we're seeing more places keep a supply of Narcan, which can easily save someone from dying during an overdose. If there's a cure to this disease in our society, we haven't found it. But we have found some ways to make a dent. Here to verify, I'm Brandon Rittiman.
We invite you to check our sources and to go in depth on the opioid problem in this article on 9news.com. Olivia Gant dreamed of serving our community as a firefighter or a police officer. Both dreams came true by the age of 6. She passed away this week at the age of 7.
So here's my bucket list.
Olivia Gant spoke frankly about her final wishes, like a girl who'd been sick nearly all her short life. Mitochondrial disease shut down her body's systems one at a time, but it could not touch her spirit, her smile. Denver police saw it when she rode with them to fulfill her wish to catch bad guys. They made her chief for the day, and the guy who is usually chief promised to pray for her. South Metro Fire saw it when her bucket list was never more literal than as they ascended to fight the fire. Through it all, her family said their wish was peace for Princess Olivia. Olivia Gant is at peace at the age of 7. Coloradans living with the most talked about name in America following the violence in Charlottesville.
I was named actually after Robert E. Lee.
And we warned you drivers, we cannot protect you from everything. There's a new Target rock in town. Next.
Welcome back. Tracking gusty thunderstorms tonight. Just another typical summer day in August with seasonal highs today in the mid to upper 80s. We'll see highs close to 90 both tomorrow and Saturday. Some of the storms have a little bit of steam this afternoon, producing some lightning, some wind and hail outside of Fort Morgan and Lyman and out around the Burlington area. All part of a tropical flow of moisture coming into the state from the southwest. That plume will be shifting a bit tomorrow, allowing for more sunshine and less cloud cover. That will mean a drier day for the most part. Can't rule out a late day thunderstorm with a bit of wind and lightning. So those hiking and biking should probably do that early in the day just to be safe. Right now, Saturday looks to be the drier of the 2 weekend days. We'll bottom out at 56 tonight. And then, well, tomorrow just looks spectacular. We have highs in the upper 80s. The Broncos take the field Saturday night, a kickoff temperature of about 81 degrees and only isolated storms as we move through Sunday afternoon and into the first part of next week. But wow, those clouds in the distance, they sure look dark tonight.
Kathy, thanks. ESPN's decision to pull a broadcaster named Robert Lee off a football game in Charlottesville, Virginia, has people claiming political correctness is out of control. None of us choose our names at birth. Some Coloradans named Robert Lee know that quite well. They know what it's like to live with a name that draws revulsion and reverence.
What is your name?
I'm Robert Duncan Lee.
My name is Robert Lewis Lee.
My name is Robert Lee. I actually have a neighbor just a couple houses down. His name is also Robert Lee.
I asked my parents about how did I get my name, like all kids are curious, and I was named after a friend of theirs.
Should you judge others for what other people did or may have done 150 years ago?
I don't know that something that happened so long ago should be so impactful in our world today, in our society today especially. ESPN.
It seemed a little ridiculous to me. I can't imagine why anyone would be upset that a sports announcer's name was Robert Lee.
You can't hold a person responsible for what their name is.
I find it hard to believe that Robert Lee in Virginia was worried about announcing a football game, so I thought it was pretty silly.
Not that I'm aware of. I don't think it's ever gave me any advantage in my different lives and career.
Certainly no repercussions. I know when we lived down south, my dad, whose name was actually Robert E. Lee, was treated like a god just about wherever he went. So he was a salesman, and I think that probably opened up a lot of doors to him.
The problem right now with America is that our focus is on the wrong things. And certainly someone's name is not something that anyone should be focusing on at any level.
Yeah, I think we need to move forward for sure, like we have for over 150 years now.
The fact that my name is Robert Lee has really any impact on my work life, my social life, really anything on a daily basis. Life is short, you know, and you have to be positive and be positive on the people around you.
There's a brand new Target rock collecting cars for sport and throwing it back this Thursday to Colorado's special visitor 24 years ago. Next. When the Target rock, bane of drivers in the Colorado Mills parking lot, was removed earlier this year, I told you Next cannot protect drivers from every hazard that they should see along the roadside. You got to watch out. And that's how someone spotted a new rock catching cars near a Target in Littleton, Wadsworth, and Bowles. People, got to keep your head on a swivel. Next viewer, Loretta Kennedy, sent us photos of a Honda that got caught on the rock and had to be towed. Our photojournalist Tom Cole camped out for a while. He did not witness the pure carnage of the last Target rock, but our friends on Facebook proved it has happened at that spot before. This, from Matt Jeffries, was taken 2 years ago at Wadsworth and Bowles. If drivers don't get smart, this new rock is going to become a stone-cold car killer just like its cousin at Colorado Mills. That, from February, the rock was removed in March. It was relocated to a happy home farther from traffic. Here's a throwback Thursday for you. It was 24 years ago this month when Pope John Paul II visited Colorado, Denver, for World Youth Day. The U.S. Secret Service posted a picture of the Pope in his Pope-mobile at Mile High back in 1993. So we dug into the 9 News archives, which smell like rich mahogany and Carl Akers cologne, and we found our file video from the event in 1993, World Youth Day in mid-August, the first to be held in North America. The final mass was at Cherry Creek State Park. Hundreds of thousands came from all over the world to attend. Interestingly enough, just last night, a next viewer brought it to my attention when I questioned whether Coloradans would be as welcoming to the outside world as folks in Wyoming were during the eclipse. Somebody said, well, just look back to World Youth Day and the Pope's visit to see Coloradans can be friendly too. We have video that we should have showed you yesterday, but we promised you today. A principal's astonishing recovery. And your feedback next. You've asked for updates on Allison Mallory's inspiring story, so here she is, the principal from Littleton who was paralyzed in a snowboarding crash, climbing a rope like back in PE class, using only her upper body strength. She continues to make great gains. Cheryl Kay says in this age of fake news, essential to have real reporters doing their best to give balanced, honest coverage. Thank you. No, thank you. See you next time.